Georgia and this is The Sound of Georgia. Sorry there wasn't a video last week, there was just a lot happening and I needed a bit of a break. But we're back today. I'm sure you've all heard the saying that there are only 7 stories in the world. Hero's journey, boy meets girl, etc, etc. And that every story is just a variation on one of those. What you might not know is that I love fanfiction. And after reading and writing Sound of Music fanfiction since 2013, I believe I've come to the realization that there are in fact only 7 stories within that fandom. So today we're going to be talking about the 7 stories of Sound of Music fanfiction. The fact that I think there just happen to be 7 is just a coincidence. It really doesn't have all that much to do with the 7 stories in the world, or even the fact that there are 7 children in Sound of Music. These are just the ones that stick out to me, and from my point of view, I've found 7. A lot of these can overlap with each other, and bar one, they can be both one-shots and multi-chapters. Those of you who don't know, a one-shot is pretty much a short story, whereas a multi-chapter is, well, it has multiple chapters, so it's much longer most of the time. There's really only one that I think is exclusively multi-chapter, and we'll get to that one in a minute. And in the same way, these stories can also be both canon and alternate universe. And I've written at least one of each of these 7 fics. And yes, there will be recommendations, and the links will be down below. So on that note, the first story is The Engagement. There really is only one ship in Sound of Music fanfiction. For those who don't know what a ship is, it's basically when you pair 2 characters in your mind in a romantic relationship. Hence the ship. And Sound of Music really only has one of those, and that's Maria and Gale. And they always end up together. If there's even a hint of romance in the story, they're together. Sometimes the kids have their own romances, but that's much later on timeline-wise, and all of their partners are original characters, or OCs. So with that being really the only ship in the fandom, everybody wants to know what happens between this moment and this moment. And these are my 2 favourite scenes. The wedding was my favourite when I was little, and the gazebo scene is my favourite now. So these stories are awesome to read. What happens between my 2 favourite moments in the show with my OTP. A lot of the time the engagement fic reminds me of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Or rather the other way around. I had to read Rebecca in year 9 at school, and I never finished it back then. But I picked it up a couple of years ago, and I am glad that I didn't finish it in year 9, because I don't think I would have picked it up again had I finished it. And I definitely wouldn't have loved it as much back then, because as I was reading it, I'm going, oh my god, this is every Sound of Music engagement fic ever. There's even a Rebecca-inspired Sound of Music fanfiction out there. Link in the down below. So if you've read Rebecca, you probably know the basics of this story anyway. And a big part of all of them is Maria trying to navigate this foreign world she's found herself in. So my recommendations for engagement fics are Time to Believe, Feels Like Home, and Confidence. That last one really reminds me of Rebecca. Again, all these will be linked in the down below. And the second story follows pretty much on from there, and that is The Honeymoon. This is also pretty self-explanatory. Everyone has a take on what they were up to in Paris. And yes, it is Paris. When they get back from the honeymoon in the movie, Kurt asks if they've brought them any souvenirs from Paris. So, the honeymoon's always in Paris. And exclusively Paris. And I think what happens in this story is probably self-explanatory. So my recommendations for honeymoon stories are Only for You and Honeymoon Encounters. So with number 3 we're continuing again, and that is What Happened After. What happened to everyone after the film ended. So these stories can be anything from stories about the escape to stories about what happens to them in America when they first get there, or even after they've been in America for quite some time. 2 bizarre alternate universe ones where Maria and Gale didn't actually end up together like they do at the end of the film. Basically meaning she didn't come back after the party. And then they meet up again later after having lived completely separate lives, and then they get together. They will always end up together. There is not a story out there where they are not a couple at some point. And my recommendations for the What Happened After are We Belong Together and A Captain Without Control. Story number 4 is the one that can be the most different, in my opinion, and that is what I like to call the epic. Basically, these are the ones that are long enough to be a novel. These can be both AU and canon, but if they're canon, for the most part they overlap with What Happened After. Nobody's written a story yet that would be a straight up novelization. So because these are all so long and so different from each other, I don't really have a general description that I can give you. But you'll know when you find an epic, because they have a big word count. But to start you off, my 2 recommendations for this category are Arrangement and If I Lose Myself. So moving on to number 5, that is romance. This one can be divided into 2 categories, sweet and M-rated. A significant chunk, in fact I'd go so far as to say the majority, of Sound of Music fanfiction writers are middle-aged housewives living out their crushes on Christopher Plummer vicariously through their stories. So there's a lot of romance, and a lot of that is M-rated, which is pretty much what you'd expect. The same thing you'd get out of a romance novel. And then the sweet ones are obviously the flip side. This is definitely the biggest story, and it overlaps with every single other one. And because of that, I'm not giving any specific recommendations. I know there's a lot of people out there who might not be comfortable with M-rated stuff, and because 99% of all the recommendations I've given you so far in this video also fit into this category. The romance story on its own, that's where it's very specifically romance focused, but you'll find romance to be a part of just about every single story. You might not find it as much in story number 6 though, and that is side characters. This usually means one thing. It's about the kids. As I said, a huge part of the Sound of Music fandom, at least the Sound of Music fandom that involves fanfiction, is middle-aged women. So the kids usually hold a lot less interest. You could definitely argue they have a bigger relationship with Maria in the show, but it's the complete reverse in fanfiction. And I've said it before, and I will say it again, however cruel this might seem, I kind of find the children as one 7-part character rather than 7 individual characters. Yes, even lethal. So, for the most part, side characters means the kids, but there are a few stories here and there that aren't about the children, which is the reason this is called side characters and not stories about the children. Usually when it's not the kids, it's Elsa and Max. And my side character story recommendations are Matchmaker, Sister Berta, the Fun Nun, this is hilarious, and The Turquoise Dress. I don't know whether you'd actually even specifically call that last one a side character, but it is amazing, and it is the only Sound of Music fic I have ever read that has changed my viewing of the film. What I'm saying will probably make a bit more sense once you've read it. And finally, story number 7, the alternate universe story where Gale stops Maria from leaving. If you have written one alternate universe Sound of Music fanfiction, it's this. It's definitely far more specific than any of the other 6 stories I've given you, but it is so common that it gets its own story. These ones can be as simple as Gale discovering the note during the party, going after Maria, telling her he loves her and bringing her back home. But there can also be a bit more to them. Because of the fact when you look at it in the most general sense, it's a lot more specific. A lot of times you have to shake it up a bit. And my recommendations for this story are Please Don't Leave and So Long Farewell. As I said, there is a lot of overlap between all of these stories, especially the epic. Because the epic is basically a novel, it can include most, if not all, of the other stories. I could probably give you 100 more Sound of Music fanfic recommendations, but I'm just going to keep it as what we've got now. You have something to start with. None of these stories were written by me, but if you want to check mine out, a link to my profile is in the down below. So all I can say is, if you choose to read any of these, I hope you enjoy. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my video next week. So long, farewell!